Well, good afternoon. Before I began working on my PhD, I spent over 20 years teaching some level of English or language arts and reading. I started my career with middle schoolers, spent most of it with high school students, and a little bit with junior college students. So I hope you'll bear with me for a couple of minutes, but I'm going to go back to those roots and begin with a brief vocabulary lesson. So raise your hand if you know the meaning of the word care. Really, I'm not going to call on you. All right. And if you don't feel like you could give a textbook definition of the word care, then I would imagine you feel you could demonstrate care if you had to. So care is a word that has denotative meaning that is clearly printed in most dictionaries. Care is also one of those abstract words that has connotative meaning subject to the emotional experiences and reaction of the person defining the word. As such, a study of the word care comes up with two opposing sets of synonyms. On the one side, you have words like sympathy, affection, compassion, and empathy. But on the other side, we have words like burden, load, worry, and duty. So the word care can bring about those warm, fuzzy feelings you get when someone says, "I care about you. I really care what happens to you." Or it could also invoke feelings of weight and encumbrance, as in, "I can't hang out with y'all after work or class tonight because I need to go home and care for my pet." My husband and I have two boxers, and there have been plenty of times that we've had to cancel out on friends or leave early because we had to go home and take care of our boys. It's because they're our responsibility. Which leads me to the second word, responsible. What does it mean to truly be responsible? If you look up responsible in the dictionary, you'll find phrases like having an obligation to do something, or being control over the care of someone or something as part of one's job. Or my favorite definition of the word responsible, being the primary cause of something and therefore able to be blamed for it or credited for it. So I'd like for you to keep those two words in mind, care and responsible, and the definitions as we move forward. So in a very popular TED Talk, Rita Pearson says that kids don't learn from people they don't like. This comment was met with laughter and applause, but in reality, this is a very accurate statement that is no laughing matter at all. Children and adolescents tend to operate on feelings and social influences. If they like a teacher, they'll work really hard to be a good student, to make that teacher proud. But students who have conflicted relationships with their teachers tend to like school a whole lot less and show lower levels of cooperation in the classroom setting. So students need a positive relationship and a secure attachment to their teachers, one that is characterized by high expectations, social and academic support, authentic caring, and genuine interest in order to feel safe and secure enough to explore their academic capabilities, stretch their intellectual muscles, reach beyond where they are, and achieve new levels of learning. I kind of like that. Explore, stretch, reach, and achieve. But students need teachers to be a help, not a hindrance, as they go through this journey. And believe me, whether we choose consciously to be or not, we are one or the other, a help or a hindrance. In fact, researchers examined the effect that a positive teacher-student relationship has on a student's socio-emotional, cognitive, behavioral, and overall academic growth and development. And what they found is that the type of relationship that a student has with his or her teacher has a significant and definite effect on their overall school success. In fact, students who have a positive relationship with their teachers tend to have higher grades, better standardized test scores, a greater willingness to take on new challenges, greater social competency, and fewer displays of misconduct in the classroom. So in other words, a caring, responsible teacher, one who builds relationships and fosters a safe and nurturing learning environment, leads to secure, confident students who trust their teacher enough to work towards academic and social growth, which ultimately leads the student to their academic goals. Now, since my academic interest and research emphasis is in the area of urban education, and how to create equity in education so that the potential for academic success is maximized for all students, I want to take a moment to point out how important that teacher-student relation is for historically marginalized students. And actually, a positive student-teacher relationship may be even more essential in urban school settings where students are faced with the additional challenges of high poverty environments. And actually, what has been found is that a positive, supportive teacher-student relationship may actually lead to academic resilience among students of color and students of low socioeconomic background who are at a risk for lower academic achievement. Additionally, African American and Hispanic students are said to benefit more from close relationship with their teachers than do white students. Yet in urban school settings where a large percentage of the students are of color and from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and yet the teachers are mostly white and middle class, there exists this cultural mismatch that leads to a distrust and a separation, making that secure, positive relationship more challenging to build. And teachers actually report higher levels of relational negativity in their relationships with children of color in general. And African American students in particularly are reported to have poorer quality relationships with their teachers. Consequently, the very students who need this positive, supportive relationship the most are the ones who are experiencing it the least. The implication is that teachers must be willing and able to initiate, encourage, support, and maintain positive relationships with all of their students, especially those who are at risk for negative outcomes. So that's me. I went to 2 elementary schools when I was little. My dad was in the military, and right when he decided that he was going to retire, I and my mom and my sisters packed up and moved to my mom's hometown. It was a small town, and her mother was very ill, so she wanted to be close to her mom. We moved right next door to my grandparents. It was in a very low-income area, and I went to a very diverse school. Y'all, I loved school. I had lots of friends, most who looked like me, a lot who didn't. I made excellent marks, and I don't remember any negative interactions or feelings about my teachers. So my dad finished up his service, he came home, and we all packed up together and moved to the other side of town. Now, it was a small town, so the other side of town was about 5 or 10 miles away, but it was the other side of town. So on the other side of town, in my new school, I was one of very, very few children of color. I understood absolutely nothing that was going on in the classroom, even though I had just transferred from the same grade, just a different school, less than 10 miles away. And I actually remember going into the bathroom almost every day, especially during math, and crying. I went from being smart, confident, and happy to feeling dumb, being teased about my ponytails, and being very sad at school. I believe that there are 2 major influences that influence the sudden degeneration of my academic intellect and identity development. Number 1, I think it was the diverging levels of expectations between the 2 schools, which is a whole dissertation in and of itself. But also, it was my teachers' lack of interest in, concern for, or investment in me as a student and my personal and academic growth. I can still see my teachers' faces as they looked at me with frustration and disdain because I was so far behind the other students. In my old school, they set low expectations for the children that were in that environment. I met and exceeded those expectations. In my new school, they set no expectations for me, and I met those as well. I believe that if just one of my teachers had taken the time to build a relationship with me, to be concerned, to care and take responsibility, then they would have seen that I was not less than. I just had some educational gaps due to the systemic inequities between the two schools across town, and those gaps needed to be filled. But my experience in that school and my encounter with those teachers affected the rest of my academic career up through my undergraduate degree, because I felt unintelligent through much of that journey, and I struggled to succeed. Now, you might say, but you did it. You're standing in front of us and you're working on your PhD, and that's true. My parents encouraged me, and that encouragement was called restriction, punishment, grounding, loss of privileges, loss of phone privileges, and we didn't even have cell phones, so don't touch that dial. Couldn't go up to dial the phone. But I muddled through. But my teachers were not a help. They were a hindrance, and it had significant negative effects on me. So I believe that in order for teachers to help their students to succeed and to build those positive relationships, they have to show care and be responsible. I believe that care can be the beginning of the end of everything from school bullying to high dropout rates, and from the disparities in disciplinary practices to the so-called achievement gap. But how do we show genuine care? I'd like to answer that question by looking at what it means not to care. Hurting, ignoring, disregarding, neglecting, showing dislike, injuring, and hating. I don't believe that any teacher goes into the teaching profession wanting or believing that these will be the words that describe their relationship with their students, but these are the opposite of caring. And if we don't believe that we're exhibiting these damaging and detrimental behaviors by not caring for our students, then maybe at the very least we're being indifferent. And how does that sound? A teacher who is indifferent to the academic and personal success of their students. And remember at the beginning when I talked about the two opposing sets of synonyms for the word care? When we truly care for our students, we're going to experience this spectrum of those words. We're going to have compassion for our students. We're going to have affection for our students. We're going to sympathize with them and empathize when we can. We're also going to worry about them, and sometimes we're going to feel burdened by what we have to go through and deal with and work with as teachers, but we're going to know that it's our duty and our responsibility, and so we're going to do it. And remember my favorite definition of the word responsible, being the primary cause of something and so able to be blamed or credited for it. Hey, we're going to have students in our class who didn't come from literacy-rich homes, students who didn't get taught how to count to 10 or write their letters or write their name. At the secondary level, we're going to come across students who have yet to have that teacher who cared and was responsible, and so they're struggling. At the moment that that student becomes your student, whether or not he or she continues to plummet or begins to rise up may be contingent on whether or not you care and take responsibility. So, if we want to be quality teachers, ones whose pedagogy is rooted in beliefs and values that allow us to build positive relationships and help our students to succeed, then we have to take some time to do some critical reflection. We have to discover whether or not we have the heart to be in this caring profession that we find ourselves in. We need to decide if we have the capacity to care for all of our students. And if we don't have the heart and we don't have the capacity, then we need to be humane enough to find another career. So I would like to make a call today. I am calling all responsible educators, calling on you to stand up and provide your students with the care they need to succeed, calling on you to be responsible, calling on you to make a positive difference in the life of your students. Thank you.